Genesis chapter 3, beginning in verse 1. Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, Has God indeed said, You shall not eat of every tree in the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, We may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, You shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest you die. Then the serpent said to the woman, You will not surely die, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes, and a tree desirable to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. She also gave to her husband with her, and he ate. So we found out last time that God planted a garden, and he put man in the garden to tend it and to work it. Then last time we saw Satan enter that garden. In this text, we see sin enter the garden. So here's the formula. God creates, Satan enters, man destroys. Satan does not have to put his hand to God's creation to destroy it. He has a willing accomplice in man, and we will see that here in this text. The first thing we see about Satan is that he is cunning. Verse 1, Now the serpent was more cunning than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. Cunning. The word is arum, and it means crafty, subtle, inventive, or prudent. It can have a negative meaning, such as verses like Job 5:12. He frustrates the devices of the crafty or the arum so that their hands cannot carry out their plans. Or it can have a positive meaning, such as Proverbs 14:8. The wisdom of the prudent, or arum, is to understand his way, but the folly of fools is deceit. So, what the word indicates is a natural intelligence that is of itself morally neutral. The goodness or badness of it depends on what work the possessor puts it to, like any tool. A hammer is a good tool to drive a nail. It's also a good tool to break out a window. Arum, or intelligence, can be used to please God, but it can also be used to displease Him, which drives the obvious question, can God be displeased? I mean, think about it. When we are displeased with something, it is displeasure at the outcome of something over which we had no control, right? I mean, if we could control it, we wouldn't suffer the outcome that caused our displeasure. A man is sitting on his couch displeased with the outcome of the football game he's watching. It would be ludicrous to say to him, if you didn't like the outcome, maybe you should have done something about it. He'd just put another potato chip in his mouth and ignore you. But what about this scenario? I'm baking a cake. I spend all morning baking it. I do the best I can to make a great cake, but when I try the cake, I don't like it. It would be equally ridiculous to say to me, you should have made the kind of cake that you like to eat. I'd say back, that's what I was trying to do. If I could have made the kind of cake I like to eat, I would have made it, obviously. So, can God make the kind of cake he likes to eat? Of course he can. So, why wouldn't he? That's the $1,000,000 question, isn't it? We can't say that God intended Satan to be one way and then he turned out the other way, in the same way that we can't say that God doesn't know how to bake a cake that he likes. Of course he does. But a cake is not a moral agent like a person is. So the plot thickens. Or if you like, the batter thickens. If I were baking a cake in which all the ingredients were moral agents, or if each separate ingredient had its own self-awareness and would like sugar is a separate person, the flour is a separate person, the eggs are separate persons, and so forth, that would make for a pretty wild baking session, wouldn't it? Who would want ingredients like that? Why would a baker make ingredients like that? It would be impossible to bake a cake out of ingredients like that. You're trying to get a pinch of sugar and the sugar is running around over there, or you're trying to get the flour into a measuring cup and it's over there doing something else, and so forth. The dish is running away with the spoon, so to speak. Imagine if you were watching this chaos unfold, the baker in his kitchen with all the ingredients for the cake running around all wild all over the kitchen. You would no doubt say to yourself, there is no way this baker is going to be able to bake a cake. You'd walk away shaking your head saying, not going to happen. What if you came back an hour later and found a beautiful 7-layer cake that tasted delicious? What if you came back and found the perfect cake? You'd think to yourself, this is the best baker in the world. Only a perfect baker could bake a perfect cake out of imperfect ingredients. You'd never doubt this baker again. Whatever you saw this baker doing in the future, you'd say to yourself, he knows what he's doing. Now, for us reading this chapter of Genesis, we've seen the cake, as it were. We've seen the cross and we've seen Christ. So when we look at the events described here in the 3rd chapter of Genesis and the events in all the Old Testament for that matter, we have to say to ourselves, God knows what he's doing. Why did God create a perfect garden full of created things that do whatever he tells them to do? I mean, think about it. He programmed his creatures perfectly. When he told the cattle to be fruitful and multiply, the cattle didn't say, I'll think about it. Cattle have no self-awareness. They have no I. God creates that world without consciousness in the garden and puts a creature into that world with a conscience, with a self-awareness, with an I. He created this creature with intelligence, and then he created a creature called Satan and gave him a sense of self and gave him intelligence, but gave him more of it than any other creature. And he puts this self-aware, intelligent creature into this perfect creation. Sounds like a recipe for disaster, doesn't it? Well, hold on. God knows what he's doing. What we have here in this text is a clash of wills, just like there was a clash of wills between the baker and his ingredients. We have the will of the man, the will of the woman, the will of the devil, and the will of God. Well, who will win? Well, we already know the answer to that question, but let's look at it anyway. The verse goes on, and he said to the woman, Satan said to the woman, has God indeed said, you shall not eat of every tree of the garden? Well, here the devil's craftiness is on full display. This is very clever. He lies by stating a question, not a declaration. He's like, hey, I ain't trying to say God's evil or anything, but didn't he say you can't eat from any of these trees? Didn't he put you here in this garden full of food and then tell you that you can't eat any of it? You know, you can lie about a person without actually lying about them, you know. The Pharisees did it to Jesus. In one of their altercations with him, they said, we're not born of fornication, which is a true statement. How did that impugn the character of Jesus? Well, what if they said it like this? We be not born of fornication. That implies that Jesus was. Like if you're talking about a politician and you say something like, but hey, what do I know? I'm not a thief. It implies that the politician is a thief. This is called muckraking or yellow journalism. A journalist wants to write about an affair that a famous celebrity is having. The only problem is the famous celebrity isn't having an affair. So the journalist asks him, is it true that you're having an affair? And the celebrity says, that's absolutely false. Then the journalist publishes an article titled, so-and-so denies having an affair. It's a true statement, but the implication is that there's something there that actually isn't there. So here Satan is trying to impugn or blaspheme God's character, and he's being really sneaky about it. He knows he has to be sneaky because these two creatures, the man and the woman, are on God's side. They're loyal God supporters, as it were. If Satan had just come up to her and said, hey, Eve, God is evil, Eve would have shut him down immediately. Satan knew he had to be smart about this thing, and he's the same today, isn't he? He doesn't come up to a man and say, divorce your wife. He asks a subtle, harmless question. Does she really care about you? Or something like that. Just a little harmless question that chips away at the walls of your faith. It's a very effective methodology. Now, Christian apologists use it all the time. Greg Koukl says his job as an apologist is not to convince you of anything, just to leave a little pebble in your shoe, something to irritate you after he leaves. And this is exactly what Satan does to Eve. He puts a little pebble in her shoe. Eve believed God was good and he wanted the best for her. Here, Satan hurls a little dart at that belief. So here she is looking at all the food God gave them in the garden, and Satan says, did God say you can't eat any of this? Well, in reality, God didn't say that at all. He said the opposite. He said, you can eat of any of this food except this one. He said, any tree in the garden you may freely eat, but of this tree you may not freely eat. And so Eve corrects him in verse 2. The woman said to the serpent, we may eat the fruit of the trees of the garden, but of the fruit of the tree which is in the midst of the garden, God has said, you shall not eat it, nor shall you touch it, lest ye die. Now notice what she did there. She said, God said we can eat of any tree except this one, which is true. Then she said, God said, if you eat it or touch it, you will die. Now, that's interesting. God didn't say anything about touching the tree. God said to Eve, don't eat of this tree or you'll die. Eve said to herself, I won't even touch it then. I won't even think about it, which is smart. That's intelligent. That's Arum. If somebody says to me, there's a lion in that room that will eat you, I'll use my intelligence or my Arum and say, then I won't go in that room. In fact, I won't even stand outside the door of it. Why would I? I wouldn't even entertain the thought of going into that room. Well, that's what Eve has done here, and it's smart. But she's not smarter than Satan. She really is no match for him, and neither are we. Remember, God made him smarter than any other creature. Verse 4, then the serpent said to the woman, you will not surely die. When Satan saw that his subtle attack wasn't working, he went for a frontal assault. His questioning method didn't cause Eve to doubt God, but to reevaluate what she knew to be true and stand strong in it. She deconstructed her faith, so to speak. Yeah, that's not always a bad thing. J.C. Ryle wrote a book called The Old Paths, where he basically deconstructed the Christian faith. And we hear a lot about deconstructionism in Christianity these days. Well, J.C. Ryle was one of the first to do it, and he found it solid. In other words, he stripped it down to the foundation to see if the foundation, which was faulty, to see if the foundation was faulty, and found it rock solid. That's the downside to the questioning technique. It can have the opposite effect. When my faith is challenged in a debate, it often comes out stronger on the other side. Iron sharpening iron, as the Bible calls it. One of the things I hated about doing discernment was all the false teaching I had to listen to. One of the things I loved about discernment was how listening to all that false teaching reminded me of how good true teaching is. So Satan begins sort of softly by whispering, did God say this? And Eve thought about it and said, no, God said something else. So then Satan comes back with, God lied, like a slap in the face, like, oh, do I have your attention now? Sometimes Satan is subtle and cunning. Sometimes he's crass and bombastic. If he can't get the man to leave his wife by asking questions, he'll try to get him to leave his wife by sending him an unsolicited email from lonely Russian teenagers or something like that. He makes a base emotional appeal if the subtle one doesn't work. But then watch what he does next. Verse 5, for God knows that in the day you eat of it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. So Satan says, you will not surely die. Then the good cop comes back, so to speak, and he starts reasoning with her. He says, God lied to you, but let me tell you why he lied to you. He lied to you because he knows that if you eat of it, you will be like him, knowing good and evil. This implies that before they ate of it, they had not known good and evil. They had only known what God told them. They had to rely on God to tell them. And God is lying to you, Satan says, because he doesn't want to lose you. He's not lying because he has bad intentions. He's lying because he loves you. And in that way, you can justify your disobedience. You can say, I know you want what's best for me, God, but I think I ought to know what's best for me. And that's how Satan beat Eve. And that's how he beats us today. Yeah, God, I know you want me to stay with my wife, and you want that because you love me, but I know me, and I know what's best for me. And if you knew what I know about me, you'd change your mind, because I know, God, that you really want for me, what you really want for me is for me to be happy. It's just that sometimes your love for me blinds, it's just that sometimes your love for me blinds you to what would really make me happy. See, it works with us. It worked with Eve. We really are no match for Satan. He takes our own will and turns it against us. He uses our strengths against us. Listen to how Paul puts it in Ephesians chapter 2. And you he made alive, who were dead in trespasses and sins, in which you once walked according to the course of this world, according to the prince of the power of the air, the spirit who now works in the sons of disobedience, among whom also we all once conducted ourselves in the lust of our flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath, just as the others. The power Satan has over us is that he has us in his control and can make us do whatever he wants us to do, and what he chooses to make us do is whatever we want to do, and so it doesn't even seem like we're in slavery. In 1 Chronicles 21:1, Satan stood against David and incited David to number Israel. I'm sure that sounded like a good idea to David. Hey, just count your men. What's so bad about that? Well, David did, and God said that was sin. Matthew 16:23, Jesus said to Peter, "Get behind me, Satan, for you are a hindrance to me, for you are not setting your mind on the things of God, but on the things of man." All Peter wanted was for Jesus not to be crucified. And that didn't seem like an unreasonable request, but Jesus called him Satan. He was speaking for Satan. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 2:11 that we should not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his designs. Well, that's easy for you to say, Paul. Are you telling us we can outwit the serpent who got Eve in the garden? Eve who walked and talked with God? Are you telling us we can outwit the serpent who outwitted David, the mighty man after God's own heart? Are you telling us we can outwit the one who outwitted Peter, Jesus' own choice to lead his apostles? Paul says yes. Well, how, Paul? How can we? Well, let's think about this. Adam and Eve were driven from the garden, from the river of life, and into the wilderness. Jesus, the last Adam, was driven from the river Jordan into the wilderness. In the wilderness, Adam was told that he could eat anything he could find. Jesus, the last Adam, was told that he could eat nothing. Satan tempted Adam to eat, and he ate. Satan tempted Jesus to eat, and he would not eat. Satan tempted Adam with power, and Adam succumbed. Satan tempted Jesus with power, and Jesus prevailed. Satan tempted Adam with divinity, and Adam failed. Satan tempted Jesus with divinity, and Satan was driven away from his presence. So the last Adam defeated Satan. And Paul says in Colossians 1:13 that he has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. 1 John 5:19, we know that we are from God, and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. So we are from God, the rest of the world is under his power. John 8, Jesus answered them, "Truly, truly, I say to you, everyone who practices sin is a slave to sin. The slave does not remain in the house forever. The Son remains forever. So if the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed." Paul says in Colossians 2, verse 8, "Beware lest anyone cheat you through philosophy and empty deceit," or arguments, as Satan was making arguments with Eve, "according to the tradition of men, according to the basic principles of the world, and not according to Christ. For in him dwells all the fullness of the Godhead bodily. And you are complete in him who is the head of all principality and power. In him you were also circumcised with the circumcision made without hands, by putting off the body of the sins of the flesh, by the circumcision of Christ, buried with him in baptism, in which you were also raised with him through faith in the working of God, who raised him from the dead. And you, being dead in your trespasses and the uncircumcision of your flesh, he has made alive together with him, having forgiven you all your trespasses, having wiped out the handwriting of requirements that was against us, which was contrary to us, and he has taken it out of the way, having nailed it to the cross, having disarmed the principalities and powers," that's Satan, "he made a public spectacle of them, triumphing over them in it." And Peter tells us to be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary the devil walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him steadfast in the faith. What faith is Peter talking about? Well, he begins that in 1 Peter 5:6. "Therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time, casting all your care upon him, for he cares for you." So what should Eve have done in the garden? She should have ran to God. She should have not said a word to Satan, but ran to God and said, "Hey, you got to do something. He's talking to me." And even more so for us, we now have Christ as our mediator, our lawyer, as it were. Lawyers tell you, don't let your adversaries talk to you. Come and tell me the moment they do. So when Satan tempts us, when Satan talks to us, we run to. We don't talk to Satan. The way you beat Satan is by keeping your mouth shut and running to Jesus and saying, "Jesus, can you handle this? This is above my pay grade. This is above my power. I'm no match for Satan. He's a roaring lion. I need you to handle this." And Jesus will go to Satan and say, Are you talking to my client? You need to keep your mouth shut. So how we win against Satan, how we outwit Satan, how we overpower Satan is by running to Christ and letting him handle our adversary. God bless you.